Really, it's nice to see such a good turnout for this meeting. We've got some exciting news for the Cascade Energy Efficiency Program. Um, with Monica's departure, we kind of took a little bit of a step back and tried to think about what the best going forward structure would be for the energy efficiency program and what's going to set it up to really continue to build on that excellent growth trajectory that we've seen, over the last, I think, decade or more. And so as part of that, we have added a manager of energy efficiency strategies. So Kathy Wold has been our energy efficiency manager for Intermountain Gas since it's really almost since the inception, and has really helped to build that program. And she's got some certification in energy efficiency program management. So she's going to help provide strategic direction for the Idaho and Washington programs. Then Caleb Reimer has accepted the position of Washington Energy Efficiency Program Manager. And so I think with these changes, we've got a really strong management team that's going to be able to help lead us, over the next few years, and really, like I said, just continue to build on this excellent program that we've got in place right now. So I guess if there's any questions, I'm happy to answer those, but just wanted to kind of let you guys all know what we were up to.
Congratulations. That's great.
All right, I'll kick it back to you, Caleb.
Yeah, excellent. And thanks for the introduction here, Lori. I appreciate it. And welcome everyone once again to our CAG meeting here. I'm excited to share some of the things that our team has been going after for the past few months and what our plans are going forward. We've got a nice slide deck to share, and we can start moving through here. I believe the first thing up we have is our safety moment, just a couple of bullet points, and then a nice video I thought was a good way to open up the meeting with a good reminder for us. Our safety topic for this morning is distracted driving, which I'm sure is not an unfamiliar topic to everyone on this phone call, but it doesn't mean it's always at the front of our mind. It should be. It's pretty important for us. Approximately 10% of all car accidents are caused by distracted driving in the United States. That's a pretty consistent data over the past 10 years, which is a huge number of both injuries, worsened injuries, as well as monetary loss. Some things that we can do in terms of helping or assisting in distracted driving minimization is buckling up, maintaining vision with the road and your surroundings, and also making sure you're not distracted or having any distractions around you while you're driving. Things like returning calls and texts after parking is probably one of the number one things that you can do to minimize that risk. And then I'll ask Jocelyn, who's helping to present today, to click on our distracted driving video, and we'll share just a little 2-minute clip that'll help share the narrative.
Imagine this. You're driving down the road, paying attention to traffic, people, dogs. You're watching out for all the crazy stuff that can happen when you're driving. Good job. Okay, let's make it harder. Imagine you have to keep driving at high speed in a busy area, but now you have to do it blindfolded. Sounds ridiculous, right? Of course it is. It would be downright insane. If you talk on a cell phone or text when you're driving a car, you're practically doing the same thing. You're at the wheel of a big disaster waiting to happen. You don't see what's coming. You're not in control. Talking and texting virtually blindfold you, taking your attention away from driving and putting yourself and others at serious risk. In fact, studies have shown that drivers on the phone have worse reaction times than many drunk drivers. Gabbing on a phone while you drive means you're up to 6 times more likely to get in an accident. And using a hands-free speakerphone or headset doesn't help. You can still be just as distracted. According to scientific studies, texting while you're driving increases your chances of a crash by a whopping 24 times. That's scary, but what's even scarier is that 70% of teens in a recent survey admitted they'd been in a car with a driver who was texting. If you're in a car with a distracted driver, even your parents, you have the right to speak up and ask them to stop. Each year, distractions caused by cell phones contribute to more than 1.5 million crashes, more than 600,000 injuries, and nearly 6,000 deaths. These numbers represent real people with lives just like yours. So why is distracted driving so dangerous? The answer lies in our brains, which aren't really designed to do more than one thing at a time. Don't believe it? Try taking a math test at a Lady Gaga concert. Not easy. Also, you only have one pair of eyes. So taking your eyes off the road to text is a recipe for catastrophe. When you drive distracted, you're dangerous, and in many places, you're breaking the law. So even though it's tempting, please put down that phone. Think about the dangers to you and others, and just drive.
Excellent. Thanks, Jocelyn, for sharing that video. We can start moving on with the agenda here. Just as an overview for those in the call, we sent out the agenda items, which will be following here shortly. During those agenda items, we request to please hold any questions till the end of that major portion of the agenda, unless the presenter says otherwise. Typically, we'll have conversations throughout each section, which oftentimes go well. So we always encourage those where they are encouraged. And then lastly, we'll plan on taking a small intermission during the middle of this meeting at some point, depending on the timing for each of these sections. We'll find a nice spot for it. Next, I believe we'll do a roll call and review some of our action items. Des, could I have you join the conversation here, please?
Okay, well, I'm going to start going in order by last name. So I will go ahead and start the roll call, and then I'll go over the action items from quarter 2. So let's start with Kyle. If you'd like to tell us just a little bit about yourself and where you're from, and that'd be great. Kyle, are you there?
Sorry about that. Hi,
That's okay.
my name's Kyle Balachi. I'm a program manager for Applied Energy Group. I'm on the call with Ken Walter, so just kind of getting up to speed on what Cascade is doing.
Thank you, Kyle. Lori.
Hi, Des. Sorry, my computer just shut down, so I'm trying to join by phone. I apologize. So I'm the Director for Regulatory Affairs and Energy Efficiency for Cascade, and again, welcome everybody to the call.
Thank you, Lori. Corey Dahl.
Hi, I'm Corey, and I am with the Public Counsel Unit of the Washington Attorney General's Office.
Thank you, Corey. Brian.
Yes, my name is Brian Farnsworth, and I'm with TRC Companies. We implement Cascade CNI program. I've been with the program personally for at least 10 years, maybe 10, 11. I've worked a couple different positions, but currently I am a business development staff member.
Thank you, Brian. Carmen.
Hey everybody, I am Carmen. I'm the manager of our customer programs department. We design, develop, and provide web services to our customers, and we also manage our inbound, outbound IVR services as well. Nice to meet you.
Thank you, Carmen. Jade.
Hi everyone. Jade Jarvis here, regulatory analyst with the Washington UTC.
Thank you, Jade. Ty Jennings.
Yeah, good morning, everybody. Ty Jennings with Cascade Natural Gas. I am a building code specialist, so I bring a focus heavily on the energy codes across all of MDU's service areas.
Thank you, Ty. Joseph, you're up.
Hello, everyone. I'm Joseph Lennon. I'm a data entry specialist for the rebates. I basically take the rebates and process them, help process them. So
thank you, Joseph. Ted.
Ted McCammett, Manager Energy Services here at Cascade.
Thank you, Ted. Devin.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Devin McGreal, Senior Resource Planning Economist on the Resource Planning team here with Cascade.
Thank you, Devin. Taylor.
Good morning, Taylor Mead, and I am a temporary rebate specialist for Cascade.
Thank you, Taylor. Noemi.
Good morning, Noemi Ortiz, Energy Efficiency Programs Manager for Cascade.
Thanks, Noemi. Michael.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Mike Parvanen, Regulatory Affairs with Cascade.
Thank you, Mike. Peter.
Hey, good morning, everyone. Peter Crystalite from NIA, and I manage the gas portfolio.
Thank you, Peter. Liz.
Hi, sorry, do you mean me, Liz Reichart?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Just wanted to make sure we were going through a roll of Cascade folks. Hi there, Liz Reichart, Senior Energy Policy Specialist at the Department of Commerce.
Thank you, Liz. Caleb, I know you introduced yourself, but just a brief one.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. Once again, Caleb Reimer, I'm the new Energy Efficiency Manager for Cascade's programs. I'm looking forward to talking today.
Thank you, Caleb. Brian?
Hey, everyone. This is Brian Robertson, Supervisor of Resource Planning with Cascade.
Thank you, Brian. Mark?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Mark Seldersvon, Manager Supply Resource Planning with Cascade.
Thank you, Mark. John?
Hey, this is John Storvik, Conservation Analyst with Cascade Natural Gas.
Thank you, John. Sonia?
Good morning, everyone. I'm Sonia Wald. I'm the Manager of Customer Systems here at MDU.
Thank you, Sonia. Kenneth?
Good morning. This is Ken Walter with Applied Energy Group, and I was the project manager on the conservation potential assessment that we'll be talking about a little bit later in this presentation.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ken. Kathy.
Good morning, everyone. Lori introduced me earlier. I'm Kathy Wold, the new Senior Manager for Energy Efficiency Strategies for Energy West.
Thank you, Kathy. Jocelyn.
Hi, good morning. My name is Jocelyn Moore. I'm an Energy Efficiency Support Specialist with Cascade Natural Gas Corporation.
Thank you, Jocelyn. Carrie.
Good morning, Des.
Good morning.
I'm Carrie Buren, and I'm the Supervisor for Program Delivery for Energy Efficiency West.
Thank you, Carrie. And Stephanie.
Stephanie Reed, Support Specialist for Cascade Natural Gas ED Department.
Thank you very much. All right. Well, everyone was able to introduce themselves. So I'm just going to go over real quick a couple of things from the last meeting. First of all, if you were interested in looking at the meeting minutes or the video on our agenda, you can see the link to go to our website, and that will bring you right to the video and the meeting minutes, not only for last one, but for any previous ones. From the last meeting, we had a few action items. On the first one was where John was to provide estimate percentages of the total budget for pilots and follow up with Jade. The pilots represent roughly 1% of the 2023 budget for John. And since it's less than 10% of the budget, follow up with Jade was not required. So it is less than 10%, which is good. And Jade will get with his internal team for clarification on portfolio conditions and follow up with us. Jade followed up and did confirm what was shared in the last meeting. And Noemi was to follow up with the Conservation Advisory Group on what the timeline looks like for the DOE draft, priority list, and tariff changes. The DOE priority list already is in our current tariff, and the tree is still being used by agencies. No action is required at this time, but since this meeting, there was an email that came from Ross Quigley, so I think Noemi will go over that a little more when her time comes on the agenda. And Caleb was to provide an update once the date time was determined for the virtual load map demonstration being offered to interested CAG members in early June. The meeting invite was emailed to the CAG members, and it was held on June 7th. So that has been completed. So that's all the action items. Any questions on those? All right, well, I am going to hand it over to Sonia. So Sonia, go ahead and take it away.
All right, I'm going to attempt to share my screen here. You guys can let me know. Hopefully you can see it. Perfect. Okay, so I just wanted to take a little bit of time today to talk to everybody about some best practices that we've implemented in regards to data requests. So coming from the IT world, we obviously get data requests from all over the place. And as time goes on and we have more and more departments and really third-party vendors involved, we started to take a real hard look at where data was being provided out to, who was responsible for that data from a business user perspective, and the data points that were being provided out. The reason we started doing this obviously was from more of a security perspective. We wanted to make sure that we had tabs on the amount of data that was going out the door, who was getting it, and in the event that we ended up with a third party, God forbid, that had a data breach, that we knew what data had been provided to them for how long, etc. This is just an excerpt of what we have. We have roughly about 22 entries in here thus far. I did cover up some of the data, obviously, because I didn't want you guys to see all the companies that we were providing data to, but we have about 22 entries in here. It gives us an idea of the frequency or interval that they're getting the data, what state they're located in. The requester and business owner sometimes are the same. Sometimes they're different, but it's really our internal folks that are involved in these data pulls so that we can circle back with them with any questions that we have, if we have any of our file transfers fail, or if the vendor receiving the data has any questions on it. We want to make sure that the business user is involved in that. And then we did start adding the data points in here that we were providing to them and the application that the data is coming out of. These are all CCMB is the billing system that we use. So these are all CCMB related. On a go forward basis, we have some, I'm going to say, visions that we want to incorporate into this. We don't have them there yet. Our first step was just gathering the list of all the data going out the door. But the next pieces that we're looking for on this is we're going to use, we currently use Jira as our ticketing system here. And we're going to build some integrations behind it so that once a year, based on this list, we're going to spawn tickets out. And what I mean by that is the business owners that are on this list would get a ticket once per year for each entry they have on here, basically asking them to confirm that this data is still needed, still required, we still have a contract in place, all of the above. Oftentimes we automate this stuff. We have it set up through secure file transfer. As you can see, it's SFTP. So it's kind of out of sight, out of mind. And we don't always get notified if it's no longer needed. So we're looking to do a yearly verification on that. And then the second piece of this, really a second and third piece that we're working on is we're working with our legal department. Some of the agreements that we have in place with vendors are quite old. You know, we put an agreement in place. We've been providing data to them for 5-10 years. And a lot changes with data and security in those 5 to 10 years. So we're looking to add another automation here that would spawn really another Jira ticket that would go to legal, ideally with the contract that we have attached to it, so that legal can review it and see if there's any changes needed, whether that's some kind of new security protocol or whatever the case is. But we just want to make sure that it's kind of front and center and being looked at on a periodic basis. That's really about all that I have to show you guys today. I just wanted to put this out there that we had some kind of a rally, I guess, to try and gather up all the data going out the door and the security around it and some of the future visions that we have for this.
Yeah, excellent, Sonia. Thank you so much for sharing this and a little bit of insight on your team. For those in the call, we thought it was a very valuable proposition to have Sonia join us this morning and share some of the insights and the expertise that her team brings to the Cascade table. As we've been working more and more over the past few years, we're working with more vendors for different requests and different data requests that need to be either intermittently or continually fulfilled. And one of the things that's always at the front of our mind is the data security and the storage for the data we provide to these vendors. Of course, there's always a vetting process through our vendor management office, as well as background checks and security checks for them. But Sonia's team is another link in the cog to make sure that we are continuing to do best practices for data security and minimize any risks going forward to our customers, the company, as well as our vendors that are involved. So thank you so much for joining this morning, Sonia. If anyone has any questions, feel free to share them. Otherwise, just want to say thank you for your time.
Thanks, Caleb.
Yeah, certainly. Great. And it looks like it's time for us to move on to our portfolio update. We've got a couple of folks joining us for this. We have, once again, Brian Farnsworth, as well as Jocelyn Moore, that are going to lead this conversation. And once again, welcome you to join here. Thank you very much.
We're going to go ahead and get started with the commercial industrial update, being led by Brian.
All right, thank you very much. Again, my name is Brian Farnsworth. I'm with TRC Companies, and we implement Cascade CNI program. It was prior implemented by Lockheed Martin and Lockheed Martin Energy, and Lockheed Martin Energy is now TRC Companies. Aaron Wines, program manager, was unavailable to join today. He is on vacation, so I am standing in for him. So if there are any questions that you feel would be more appropriate for Aaron following this meeting, you could email him directly or email me and I can forward it to him. But getting started here, you can see our this chart here. Essentially, it's helpful because it not only shows current year, therms saved and incentive, but it also compares it to the prior year, which is always kind of helpful to see where we stand this year and where we stood the year prior. You can see, obviously, we are better positioned than we were at this time last year, coming off of COVID, obviously, last year, and the resulting sort of impacts the supply chain and sort of customers' attitude towards making improvements and all that sort of stuff has improved a bit. You can see that we've paid out $500,000 in incentives in Q2, and then that brings our incentive total to 988,000 for through Q2, and then you can see the Q2 therms at 95,000, and then the year to date at 216,000. So that represents 40% of our annual goal for 2023 and what we have achieved. And then achieved in addition to projects that we've identified as either our pre-pipeline, which are kind of immediate projects we expect to close, in addition to our forecast, which are projects that we forecasted to close sometime in 2023. That total is 71%. So we still have about 30% of projects to reach our goal that we are still hoping to identify. But that's sort of where we stand. And then the chart beneath that just kind of reiterates what I said, and then it also shows the remaining to goal therms figure there, which is 129,000. So next slide, please. Okay, so a part of our CI outreach, a big part of it has been in-person visits. So I'm a BD team member, so I have been personally out on the road visiting customers, visiting some key accounts in my particular zone, which is zone 1. And then other BD staff, they've been performing similar outreach, in person, call, email, that kind of thing. But what we've really been hoping to implement moving forward through the rest of the year are really customer walkthroughs. So we've begun to advertise those, and we're really solidifying how we're going to offer those to customers, which is going to be done through each BD member in each of Cascade's territory. Zones 1 through 3. And essentially, we're going to say, hey, these business development folks are available to come and take a look at your facility, see what opportunities you have, whether it's improving the efficiencies of equipment, or almost more importantly, what we found now is these kind of lower cost improvements, which might not mean installing new efficient equipment for the customer, but could be changing their building controls, improving their control efficiencies through their set points and occupancy sensors and that kind of thing. Because we've found that some of the building stock is not, they don't have their control systems optimized, and so there's sort of this low-hanging fruit. So we're going to be trying to identify that. I will personally be conducting some of those in-persons and walkthroughs myself, and so we have high hopes that that will help engage our customers even more. So next slide, please. Okay, now this just shows our 2-year goal, essentially. So you can see with last year's performance, we have quite a bit to make up to meet the 2-year goal. We're going to be pushing as hard as we can. One thing to note here is that we do have a program that is heavily influenced at times by a single very large therm savings project. So while you see this performance here, we also have years where, for instance, we just got a brand new project that is not represented in our forecast currently, but is through the U.S. Navy, and that project could meet 1 year's therm savings, if not 2. So that's something to consider, is that we have those very large projects which influence our therm savings goal, obviously, which can span several years. So something to consider there, and you will be seeing more about the Navy project coming up very soon. Next slide. Is that my last slide, Jocelyn? Perfect. So are there any questions currently for me?
Hey, Brian, this is Jade with the UTC.
Yeah.
I'm just kind of curious about the delay of the building code, changes, and I'm wondering if that has impacted these savings at all, or if that would be more on the residential side as far as impacting things. Have you seen any sort of rebound since those code changes got delayed, or is it kind of just the same decline, I guess?
Well, it does play into our strategy, which is to notify these customers, if you're going to be making changes, if you plan to make changes to your natural gas heating systems, water heating systems, now would be the time to do it. That was obviously our message, thinking that it was going to be sort of summer, that the time the change was going to be taking place. But I can't say that we've necessarily seen an upswing as of yet. But that being said, we are obviously really pushing hard, given that that is our timeline, and that we would like to notify the customers that if you're thinking about doing it, now's the time. Obviously, it's been extended, but this summer, this fall. So
got it. Thank you.
Yes.
Well, thank you very much, Brian.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Moving on to the residential team. CNGC residential team saved approximately 146,000 therms in the second quarter of this year. Also provided about $1.6 million in incentives. This brings the program total to about 53% at about 50% of the year. So we are currently on track to hit 100% of the 2023 yearly goal. That is assuming that processing cadence stays consistent and application submissions continue to stay consistent. But there is also potential to meet 97% of the biennial goal at the same time. In order to do this, we have to process applications, and there are currently 1,258 applications waiting to be processed in the working queue. This represents about 23% of the 2023 yearly goal, about 115,000 therms. Slightly less than that number were applications received at about 1,200. The lion's share of these applications were through the point of sale program being led by Stephanie Reed. Approximately 61% of the applications in Q2 were through the point of sale program. This is about 50% high, or the 1,200 applications received is about 50% higher than the 3-year average, which is 800 applications. So we're seeing a fair amount of growth in primarily due to the point of sale program. And you can kind of see that here on the graph on the slide. The point of sale program this year has grown a lot under the stewardship of Stephanie. An additional contractor, trade ally contractor, was signed up in Q2, bringing the total to 17 trade ally contractors. They are given a lot of training to be able to navigate our program, make it easy on the customers. And in order to do that, we rolled out a point of sale trade ally portal, which includes a signature field for customers to be able to sign out at their own home to get the application quickly without too much hassle. But a physical signature sheet is also being developed, and all of these tools and trainings are being provided to the trade ally customers to facilitate customer engagement. Within the point of sale program, there's kind of two models. There's a door-to-door model that is being wildly successful, as well as the kind of standard customer-led contractor relationship. Both are seeing growth, but the door-to-door model is certainly being very successful right now. Unfortunately, the builder program is not seeing the same amount of success. It is virtually stagnated. We had one builder provide applications in this last quarter. This is likely due to the 2021 Washington State Energy Code rollout later in the year, having a cooling effect, but that is where the builder program is at the moment. And as Lori mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, Kayla Breimer has taken on the leadership of the energy efficiency team, following Monica Kalashaw as part of the company. And if there are any questions, I'd be happy to say I don't know, and I'll get back to you. All right. If there are no questions, I'm going to pass it on to John for our pilot updates.
All right. Thank you, Jocelyn. So currently we have some updates to provide for the residential pilots. The two ongoing pilots being the home energy report pilot and the aero barrier pilot, which I'll be providing this update for. It's currently trending in the same direction as the builder program, in which we're just seeing low participation, and interest has not been very high. We've done what we could to get the word out there, partnering with HBAs within our service territory, attending some in-person opportunities, such as a demo installation, which occurred in June, but unfortunately there's no Cascade builders that showed up to that. But we were able to speak with the Whatcom Builders Association, and that had some good turnout, but unfortunately it didn't generate much additional interest in the pilot. So at current, we have one builder that is participating, which means they are having homes blower door tested and then installing aero barrier, and we're working with the Building Performance Center, and they're sending over those pre-installation blower door tests. and are also scheduling those tests with the builder. And then we just received, I believe, our third completed inspection yesterday. So didn't quite have time to update the slide, but so far they have 3 that have received that pre-installation blower door test and will be air sealed now. And then later on, when they would be performing their blower door test for the state code requirement, that is when we will come back in and do the post blower door test. So since that will be the final air leakage rate that we would use to determine energy savings. There is one builder in Zone 2 that has had some interest, and I've continued to communicate with them, but it's getting a little late in the year, I believe, for them to be able to really take advantage of the program. So I'm not sure that they're going to be able to, but certainly we're still staying in communication to see if that will go through. So we'll just open it for any questions about the status of the pilot before we move on. All right, I'm not
Hey, John,
hearing.
sorry, jumping in at the end
Oh,
here.
hey,
So timeline for this, if we're kind of nearing the end of the season where folks can implement, you know, are you imagining continuing this next year at the beginning of another building season, or if this kind of, you know, peters out here, how are you guys feeling about that?
We have discussed the possibility of it continuing into another building season. I do think that there are some concerns around about what the code going into place, what that ultimately will look like, and you know, if we're struggling to get a good amount of interest and participation at this point under the existing code, what that would look like under the new code. So it's something that we're discussing. We haven't made a determination yet on whether we will continue into next year. But it is certainly something that, you know, we'll have to address, because this isn't the level of participation we really needed to be able to make a determination on whether this is a worthwhile incentive to pursue, at least in terms of quantifying what energy savings might look like in our service territory.
Gotcha. Thanks, John.
Absolutely. Moving forward.
All right, Brian again. It sounds like I sort of already covered these points in our outreach update. So basically, just to reiterate, lower no cost to customers, looking at retro commissioning, free building walkthroughs. So that should be happening very soon. But like I said, I think I already covered that, which is what this slide shows.
On to low-income weatherization, being led by Melanie Ortiz.
Thank you, Jocelyn. You could go to the first slide. So just a brief overview of what we have so far in Q3. We've served, so far the total is 75 homes. We've had a really good quarter. Installed measures, 139. You can see all of these numbers here. Our average cost per home has been fairly low, and I'll show you in the next slide why. This is just a broad overview. If we can go to the next slide. We have for just in this quarter alone, we've exceeded our targets for the entire year. The agency's projected 65 total homes for this program year. NCAC completed a large multifamily project this last quarter, which was 52 single. It was a multifamily duplex or fourplex, so they had 52 completed. And they had really only projected 5 units to complete. They weren't certain they would be able to pull it off. So we have exceeded the target for this year. However, the more the merrier. So we're looking good so far. There it did, with the amount of projects we completed so far, it does bring down our cost per unit average And you'll see here that we've noted so far it's about 19,000, a little over. Each one of these projects at NCAC averaged out maybe 3,500 to 8,000 based on a measure. So that will significantly drop at the end of our year reporting. And I believe that's all I have in that update. For our commerce updates, and Ross was kind enough to clarify some of these, but we do have in conversation with the agencies and also with commerce, as of July 1, the ECOS database is live, it's implemented. It still doesn't have the ability to do some of the energy modeling, but it is available to agencies, and it will be the tool they'll use and transition out over the next few months. TREAT will be discontinued for single family units once ECOS has the energy modeling features available for the agencies. And that projected by Ross, and I spoke to Angie Eater at the Department of Commerce, may take a few months depending on troubleshooting. It could take a few more than that. And the reason for sharing this is we currently use, as Des mentioned at the beginning, the TREAT for our rebate programs. We allow both the TREAT and the priority list. So one of the things that will be phased out will be the TREAT for single family units once the energy modeling tool is implemented into the ECOS database. TREAT will continue for single or for multifamily units. And the replacement of this will not, it doesn't directly affect us right now as the tariff stands, since we do allow for the priority list. Once the TREAT is phased out, it'll be replaced by two separate priority lists, which is the Department of Energy priority list and the Deems Measure priority list. The difference here is both of them are pre-approved measures, except one is a pre-approved measure by the Department of Energy and the other is pre-approved measures by the Department of Commerce, which the Department of Commerce has their Deems Measure list also comes from the same. They created it based off of the DOE list, but they added a few more items, from my understanding, to cover mobile homes, manufactured homes. So it is a little bit more enhanced, but it is overall a similar list. However, with the Deems list, you can't use DOE funding. Those are the only caveats between those lists. DOE is allowed for DOE funding, and the Deems Measure priority list doesn't allow for DOE funding for the agencies. A small update on the community action agencies. We're still seeing some supply chain and labor shortages affect program performances. One of the things, major things, is the contractors used in the area. They have one major general contractor, so it creates delays in project completion. Right now, a few of the agencies in Central Washington have 3 to 8 weeks, maybe longer, on project timelines and material wait times. In addition, they also have, I had some, which this isn't on the agenda, but I had some conversations yesterday. There's also some high turnovers that's presenting with agencies that normally had a couple quality control inspectors and energy auditors on standby or on staff, no longer have that flexibility, and they're down to one person that's doing both roles. So there is new hires on board, but that process, it can take anywhere from 12 to 18 months from new hire up until the person is fully trained on field and certified to do quality control inspections and energy audits. So it's been a bit of a transition for some of the agencies in Central Washington. And it's creating some delays there. And the last bit of it, which I covered here, is NCAC. That was more of a shout out type of thing with the completion of 52 projects in the last quarter. A little breakdown there. There was 44 high efficiency natural gas furnaces installed in this low income multifamily unit that spanned over Sunnyside, Grandview areas. And we had in projected just last week, there was an additional 13 that didn't make it on to here that will also be closed out, that also received attic insulation. And we continue to see there should be an additional 14 coming through. So to finish this multifamily project. And that is my low income update. And I'll open it up for questions if there is any. Yeah, Hugh?
Can't hear you if you're talking.
Do I be muted?
Hi, Gil. It does show that you're muted at this time.
Sorry about that. Okay, so the variation in the cost per home. I remember an earlier meeting in which there was a home with 33,000 and it had to go through a procedure to be approved. And then I'm doing some work in Pennsylvania and I'm seeing that homes are being approved at like 50,000, just like some of your homes here, because what they're doing is like whole house repair and retrofit beyond the normal things. Instead of having a walk away, they actually do all the things that you don't do, because if you're going to treat these homes, they have to be treated that way. And so I wonder if you could just say something about what's the difference between the homes that are coming in at 50,000 and let's say the lowest price home.
Well, it's that exactly, as you mentioned, we're approaching this as a comprehensive home. So a lot of it has been in the example here, those $50,000, $40,000 homes we're seeing, there's a lot of incidental cost. So instead of walking away, there's homes that we found that maybe need a little bit of patchwork. There's some dipping in the floor. There's some rewiring that needs to be done. And a lot of these things are causes for deferrals. It's causes for the agencies to walk away. And at times they're overexpended in their commerce funds or other funds. And they just simply don't have the flexibility, or maybe they're reserving those funds for, other measures, their health and safety or repairs. They are limited, sometimes 15% to 10% of their budgets, where ours is a little bit more flexible. So it is a comprehensive approach. And we cover the incidental cost of these things. The alternative would be to walk away from these homes, and we're not protecting low-income housing. This home will continue to deteriorate. And if the community action agencies can't help, this is where we step in. And that's the cost differential that we're seeing, is covering those incidental costs.
That's really great, because Washington has always had this problem with a lot of walkaways. It's just characteristic of Washington State more than other states. And but you've got to come up with a solution that it's really solid support for your customers to be able to treat the real problems of the house, instead of having to say, oh, well, sorry, well, we can't do it because you don't qualify because it would cost too much. So I think this is really great. You found a way to treat some of these. So thanks.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, Naomi, for sharing that process and leading the charge on that front, and also to Gil for having that conversation with us. We always appreciate the insight and the expertise, so much appreciated. Looks like the next topic we have up here on our agenda is some code impacts to EE programs. So of course, it's no surprise to each person on the call that one of the things our program looks most diligently at going forward is the code impacts. Perhaps most importantly, the 2021 Washington State Energy Code and the changes that have been involved with that over the past few months. Fortunately, we have Ty Jennings on the call with us, who is the code expert for NDU, who oversees the Cascade service area. So I'm going to pass it over to him. He's going to share a little bit of the insights he's learned recently, as well as his expectations going forward. Thank you, Ty.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks, Caleb. If you don't mind clicking on to the next slide, whoever's in control. So going to provide just a brief update here on the Washington State Building and Energy Codes. First thing to really address here is that the codes have been delayed, and that will be 120 days from the initial date that was specified of July 1. Those codes will not go into effect until post October 29th of this year. Further delay is possible. As of right now, that has not been requested nor filed. However, there is discussion that further delays may be possible. Now, these delays were intended to address the legal uncertainty that was stemming from the California Restaurant Association versus City of Berkeley. And what we're looking at here is preemption of the state adopted codes by EPCA. Specifically, what we're looking at is the new energy codes here in Washington State do restrict the ability of the consumer to use appliances that are covered by EPCA. As discovered during that Berkeley case, the legal system has ruled that that is not in line with EPCA. So our state is seeking alternatives to figure out how to resolve that. The process to do that was opened up through a expedited rulemaking process. With the filing of that expedited rulemaking, the TAGs, technical advisory groups, were convened. The TAGs are currently meeting. We have additional meetings later this week and beginning of next week. Those are going to be the second in a series of meetings of the TAGs. Proposals were solicited by the State Building Code Council. The TAGs then get to review and make recommendations. From there, those recommendations will be transmitted to the MVE. The MVE is a standing committee of a subset of the full council that's going to specialize in mechanical ventilation and efficiency. That committee will then seek input from the State Attorney General's office, where they will receive input on if the proposals will adequately address EPCA. We look forward to participating in those meetings. Myself will be actively participating. From the MVE, they will then transmit whichever proposals that the MVE feels one meets the intent of the rulemaking, as well as having that input from the Assistant Attorney General's office, make recommendations there. MVE will then forward that to the State Building Code Council. Once the council has the opportunity to review that information again, they will then put that out for a public comment period. The public comment period will run for about 30 days, including options for testimony on both the east and west side of Washington State. From there, it'll make its way back to possibly the TAG and MVE, but really it'll make it back to the council. And then they'll have the opportunity to approve, disapprove, modify, and then from that we will see an official publication in the form of a CR 103 that will let us know what the official rules are. The State Building Code Council is looking forward to having this process hopefully wrapped up in September. There is definitely a question as to whether they'll be able to get it done at this very accelerated timeline. The state has actually expressed some question related to that as well. So on top of this, and kind of possibly parallel to it, the State Building Code Council is facing multiple legal challenges. Those are both in state and federal court. So all this is to say the Washington State energy codes are really indeterminate at this time. We don't know what proposals are going to be moving forward. I mean to show, as we kind of went over the process here, that there's multiple chances for these codes to evolve, to see change. So as we engage in this process, we are going to be constantly readdressing and looking at the possibilities as it shapes all of our programs across Cascade's service areas. So open it up to if anyone has any questions, but that's a quick rundown of what we've got going here in Washington.
Yeah, excellent. If anyone has any questions, feel free to jump on the mic here. But otherwise, I just want to say thanks again for Ty for joining this morning. We were pretty fortunate to have him join the company here in the relatively recent past and provide his expertise to our team as well as other teams under the MDU umbrella. In particular, we had Ty join us for some of our larger projects, such as a conservation potential assessment, which we'll be talking about here shortly. We know that there's quite a bit of nuances and intricacies with the code and the code changes. So having an expert available to us almost 24/7 is fantastic. So thank you very much for having that insight. Excellent. And if I may, this is our conservation potential assessment update. This will be a bit of a longer section as we have our folks from AEG, Applied Energy Group, on the call give us a demonstration. What I'd like to do is take right around a 10-minute break or so, give everyone a chance to stretch the legs and be prepared to enjoy a great conversation about our CPA update. So with that, what I'd like to do is pause the meeting for about 10 minutes, and we'll see if we can resume right around, looks like 10:08 or so Pacific time. So thanks, everyone. We'll see you here shortly. All right, looks like it's right around 10:08. Des, we'd like to pop on just for a second, and then we'll introduce the AEG team.
Yes, hi there. I just wanted to remind everybody that I am recording and transcribing this meeting. I also wanted to welcome Gil. He was able to join us a little bit later. So welcome, Gil, and I will let Caleb take it over. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. So those in the call for our last Conservation Advisory Group meetings are probably familiar with the CPA, which is Conservation Potential Assessment, the process we've been undergoing with that since the beginning of the year here. That has come to a great culmination at this point in time, and we'd love to have our folks from AEG, being Ken Wolter as well as Kyle, hop on and share some of the insights and have a conversation about the process, the results, and some of the options we have going forward. With that, I'd love to pass the microphone over to our AEG team and let them take it from here.
All right. Thanks, Caleb. Good morning. Everyone hear me okay, I assume? I'm usually loud enough. All right. So, yeah, we just want to start this morning with kind of the 10,000-foot view of what the CPA process is, just to remind folks. And then we'll talk about some of the more interesting assumptions that went into the modeling this time around and some high-level results. As well as at the very end, some scenarios that we've been talking about for sort of alternate viewpoints from the CPA. Once you build that foundation, it becomes a useful tool for looking at different things. So we can go ahead and step to the next slide. For anyone who's not familiar with the CPA process or would like a refresher, this really takes place over 4 main stages. The first being market characterization, where we break down what's the energy use at the customer level at a very granular basis. We utilize baseline studies and surveys that have gone on, especially in the Pacific Northwest. There's the advantage of the NIA surveys. We use utility data from Cascade, their customer database. And where necessary, we can gap fill with data from outside the region, like things from EIA or other sources like that. That's all to build up a picture of how energy is being used in the baseline, because how it's being used now has the implications on what you can save in the future. You know, who has a furnace that you can intervene on, who's already high efficiency, that kind of question. The second part of it that kind of goes hand in glove with it is identifying the resources you can actually intervene on. So obviously that comes a lot from what are the technologies in use right now, but also trying to draw the broad net of, you know, there's efficient equipment you can replace. There are outside interventions you can do, like insulation or controls measures. And we do try and draw a broad net for emerging technologies and things where we can find good, quantifiable, reliable impact data on those. And again, you know, in this region, NIA is a great partner for that. The third phase is the actual baseline projection. So this is taking that single year market characterization from step 1, and now we step it forward in time. And that gives us a stock accounted model. So we're counting every widget as it goes through, and we're able to keep track of the impact of building codes, equipment standards that go into place and require, you know, more efficient equipment than might have been required in an earlier year. All of that goes into this baseline projection. And then finally, that provides the reference grounds for the potential estimate itself, which, you know, you could think of as an alternate sales forecast if you wanted to, but basically creating a picture of, in a particular scenario, what kind of savings are possible. And we do a few different scenarios for this forecast. There's technical potential, which is everyone does everything the highest efficiency possible, regardless of costs or even market barriers. Achievable technical, which is common in Northwest and the council's methodology, but looking at, you know, putting the market barriers in, but not worrying about cost effectiveness yet. And then finally, economic achievable, which is where we not only have, you know, the ramp rates of things coming on, but we're also testing whether or not things are actually cost effective. And then, you know, able to look at that from different perspectives, but really making sure that, you know, does this measure's savings benefit outweigh its costs? and therefore it actually makes sense to pursue from a programmatic perspective. Probably no new information there, but it's always nice to refresh up front. I think we can go to the next slide. Now, this particular CPA was on something of a compressed timeline, and there was really good detailed market characterization that was done for the previous one. So we are relying on that really robust analysis that was done, breaking customers into different income groups using available census data, and really focusing, letting that having been done so well that time so that we could really focus on high priority updates for this CPA's process. So you can see some examples of the level of breakdown that we do there, where we're breaking energy uses first at the sector level, residential, commercial, industrial, breaking residential into different housing types, single and multifamily, as well as I mentioned, we did income groups last time. And then for Cascade, because the different regions of the state that they operate in are so disparate, we actually do have a climate zone distinction on residential as well. Climate zones are not as germane on the commercial side. Basically, what kind of business is operating has far more impact on end uses than any climate zone variations there. So you can see we break it up: offices, restaurants, education. Not all the labels are showing. These graphs are a little compressed. But again, we have multiple different building end uses here. And the purpose of this is really to get meaningful distinctions in use per customer. As you can imagine, an apartment does not use energy to the same degree or the same ways as a single family home. A restaurant is drastically different from an office's load. And having energy in the right end uses and quantified correctly gives you an understanding of what kind of impacts you can see at different sites and where these opportunities actually are. So again, it's about grounding savings estimates in real data as much as possible. This is where we get into some of the fun new stuff that we did develop during this CPA. So I will be talking in a few places on this one about the assumed impacts for the Washington State Energy Code 2021, which we already heard from Ty and a few other conversations about. There is a lot of uncertainty around this. So it's important to know that as we were doing the CPA, really the ink was almost dry on it before that postponement ruling came down. So all the assumptions you're going to see going forward are under the assumption that Washington State Energy Code 2021 went into effect as planned. That said, the delay right now is only into October, and the first year of potential we'll be showing is 2024, by which point whatever code is finally settled should be in place, and we don't really have an understanding yet what modifications are going to be made. But that's an important sort of frame of context for all the results that you're going to be seeing here. So under the assumptions that we had around the time, we are assuming electric heat pumps are required for space heating and water heating in new construction. There are some very limited exceptions for certain secondary or supplemental needs in very specific places, but not many of those. So you can see in the chart on the right here what an impact that has just on average use per customer. This is just showing average existing homes on the left little column there, and on the right side, the average new home that would be constructed. Now, these are going to be similarly sized buildings, but because the presence of gas equipment is greatly reduced, and any gas equipment that does go in is going to be very high efficiency, you can see just the dramatic difference in average use there, less than half. And then separately, there are some local considerations for new customers actually coming on and whether or not they will be able to connect new homes to gas. So again, you've got kind of multiple things hitting here, whether the equipment itself will be allowed, whether it's going to be required to be very high efficiency already just by code, and whether even additional connections will be allowed here. And that all has impacts on what the future loads will be and what the future opportunities are actually going to be, because you can't get savings off of a furnace that doesn't get installed in the first place. And to kind of get an illustration of that, we can look at the next slide, which is contrasting. This is contrasting essentially what these two futures would look like. One, you can see the purple dotted lines that are going up would be normal customer future without the new code and standard going in. So this would just be showing essentially, if use per customer remained as it is now, and just a mild increase in customers according to the normal customer forecasts. But you can see how different that is and how much higher it is for both residential and commercial compared to the actual reference baseline that we're using in the CPA, which is the orange lines, which are declining pretty dramatically because you've got existing buildings getting more efficient and turning over their equipment. And then you really have minimal new construction coming on at all. Either it's not going to be gas in the first place, or the gas that it is going to be using is already going to be very minimized. And in the next slide, that's even a starker contrast. So here's our reference baseline, and you can see the large blue block is the existing building use. And that does decline over time as customers either roll over, and existing homes eventually will get weatherized after they've been around for 20, 30 years. There's always some amount of turnover that can make building shells more efficient, and then also equipment itself turns over and at least has to come up to minimum code standards of the time. So those loads decline over time, but then that little orange slice on top is all that's coming online from new construction. So the real important component of this is when we're looking at savings downstream is to recognize that really all of that is coming from existing buildings, either incentivizing people replacing equipment where that's allowed, or retrofits on things like building shell. But there's really very little going on in the new construction space anymore that's going to be available for potential. So as I mentioned, the focus of this CPA was really updating top priority measures as identified in sort of a joint analysis by Cascade and by AEG. Anything that had updated costs or savings in RTF workbooks since the last CPA was completed, that really hits a lot of the heavy hitters: residential furnaces, water heaters, smart thermostats, windows, weatherization measures. So really the main things that come to mind already came in that category. Measures affected specifically by the Washington State Energy Code change or municipal bans. So really that's distinct from their cost or savings analysis. Really that's looking at what is the actual market going to be in terms of whether these units are available to work with. And then measures for specific regional interests and conversation. Gas heat pumps and dual fuel scenarios are always a topic of conversation at these meetings. So we wanted to be sure we had the latest and greatest data from NEA or whoever else on what those efficiencies might be and availability in terms of can you actually go get these models. And then we also took a look to be sure, to round out, looking at anything that's top performing in programs or just high interest from conversations that Cascade has had with contractors or with customers. There's a lot of overlap between these categories, but these were essentially the criteria that we used to identify what measures would be prioritized for this update. And with all of that background, we can start talking about results. So this is a top level view of the all three sectors: residential, commercial, and industrial. And you can see as we work out over the first couple of years, 2024, 2025, it's a little less, I'll go in highest order. So technical potential across those 2 years is about 2% a year for the first couple of years, and gets up to about 36% of baseline load is technically possible to save. Now, again, I should stress that is the pie in the sky. Absolutely everyone goes gas heat pump pretty much. Building shells are maximized. But that's really the upper limit of achievable or of technical savings across the territory. And there are a lot of market barriers there, which is why you see as soon as you step over to achievable technical, it immediately cuts a lot of that out. And again, that's really about availability of units, and in some cases, just making sure that the achievable technical is grounded in something that could actually be run through a program, hypothetically. So there you're looking at about 0.7% of baseline, or 1.5% over the 2 years. It comes in just shy of 20% of baseline over the whole study perspective. So backs it off quite a bit from the technical. And then for cost effectiveness, we're looking, this is showing from the UCT perspective. It's a modified UCT. It does include some non-energy benefits, and that's been worked out with Cascade over the years. And you can see there, that's coming in a little shy of 0.5% per year for those first couple of years, comes out to 14% of baseline at the end of 20 years. So that total 20-year UCT potential you can see there is about 23 million therms, or 23,000 therms on this chart. Getting a unit that's easy to read is always fun for some of these tables. You can see that visually over selected years in the top right, just kind of see how that stacks up over time. And as the bullet point notes, most of the cost-effective savings, the majority, more than half, is in existing buildings and specifically existing residential. There's actually more than half of the savings shown here. We can get a little more detail on that. The top measures chart is a little bit of an eye chart. I'm not going to try and read the whole thing, but this is top measures across all sectors. So you'll see them labeled with what sector they're coming from, and you can get a sense of what those savings look like over time. Number one measure is still residential furnaces. In this case, it is the AFUE 97, which is a little bit higher than has been the past program activity. Some of that has been looking more at 95s, but the 97s are coming in as cost effective in this analysis, and they do represent a strong portion of potential. It's about 13% of this whole of total savings over the 20 years. You can also see several weatherization measures coming through here. A couple of things are going on with those. One big impact is that the required R values under the new energy code, when an intervention is done, it has to come up to some higher R values in most cases, up to the limits of the physical space. There are some caveats to that. So that second line, for example, where it says R49 to R60, depending on space, that's based on the requirements, but also the allowances that are in the WSEC 2021. They would like everyone to aim for R60, but they do say if you get to R49 and you run out of room, then that's acceptable. So we have some blended savings going on there. And then you can also see some strong potential in some other places, some residential water heaters, mostly focused here on instantaneous water heating, but there is also Energy Star tank water heaters that are cost effective, and some boiler retrofit measures in commercial that are showing some strong potential as well. Take a short pause for breath before we dive into scenarios. What we just looked at, we would essentially consider a reference case of potential, and that's what's going to be in the CPA report, and we'll, and whatever downstream planning that Cascade wants to glean from that. But as I mentioned, now that we have these models set up with a reference case, it's very common, and we are contracted with Cascade to do additional scenario analyses, kind of around either what ifs or things that are known to be changing or might change in the future. So this is 2 defined scenarios that we've worked out with Cascade, although in the second one, defined is perhaps a bit of an overstatement yet, and we want to have some additional conversation on that. But for this first one that we're already, work is underway on, is we're calling a lower opportunity scenario. And the idea behind that is that all of the uncertainties surrounding codes and other things, as people have been speaking about in this meeting already, it is making participation a little more difficult to acquire. People are a little more skittish about it. There are pushes for additional electrification, which of course removes gas using equipment from the equation. So it's not available to provide savings. It's just plain not there. So in terms of the adjustments that we'll make to the model to reflect this scenario, is we're going to slow down the participation ramp rates. We are using essentially Power Council ramp rates. Yes, they're developed for electric studies, but we have been able to adapt them to Cascade CPAs so far. But we can slow them down to next slower ramps, so that that's representing sort of that reluctance to adopt that might be slower than we've seen in past program years. And then also converting some defined percent of current gas, space, and water heating to electric units over a specified period of time. We're still working with Cascade over what that percentage and what that period of time might be, but we have done that kind of analysis for some other utilities, gas utilities through the country as well, and that typically looks something like moving 10% of gas space heat customers to electric by 2030, or some other kind of target-based scenario. So we have not defined those actual values yet. Those are still in conversation. I'm sure if members of the CAG have strong opinions on what some of those numbers should be, Cascade would be interested in hearing them. But that's how we're planning to approach this low opportunity scenario and see how that affects the available savings into the future. The second one, which we have a whole additional slide on past this actually, but in brief, is really to try and address the delay of WSEC and understand or guesstimate what kinds of modifications are likely to actually go into it. So maybe we can go to the next slide. And Caleb, would you actually mind maybe becoming a discussion moderator on this topic?
Yeah, absolutely. I think a lot of what goes around this slide here is involved with that second scenario analysis, which Ken mentioned, and the idea of it being kind of up in the air or an open proposition for the team and for our CAG here specifically today. One of the things that we're thinking about is it's almost a guarantee that was modeled in our CPA under the original assumptions earlier this year is most likely going to be different than what the actual result of with this WSEC 2021 being delayed, modified, likely both, that sort of thing. So one of the scenarios that we are planning on looking at towards the end of this year, most likely in terms of timeline, is reviewing the assumptions under WSEC 21 in the CPA forecast, seeing what either has been officially approved or what the conversation is leaning towards, thanks to the help of Ty and some other people on the call who have insight into those conversations, and then rerunning that model to adjust our baseline or adjust our expectations accordingly in scenario format. That's one of the things we'd like to see if there's any sort of input or knowledge that our CAG members have this morning that perhaps we have not been exposed to, or something that we should definitely have in the front of our minds as we're looking at this scenario modeling towards the end of this year. I open the floor up to anyone that would like to share anything or provide any insight if you have it. And of course, I think a lot of people on the call are kind of similar boat as us, where we're seeing the conversations unfold, although they have not been finalized yet. Perhaps a more appropriate approach would be to leave this offer on the table almost in perpetuity, and please reach out to myself or anyone else on our team that you would like to, if you have any sort of insight or any gleanings as either it is finalized here in October, or if we have any sort of adjustments that happen before or after that fact. We'd love to incorporate them and make our CPA as reflective as possible of the current environment at that time it's created. Any questions or input from our CAG members? Not necessarily this portion, but of the CPA process or results overall. Yeah, Peter.
Hey, Caleb, thanks. No, this is great. I really appreciate all the details. A lot of hard work went into this. And this isn't even I guess a comment on, I think the approach sounds good, and maybe more of a request, or like, hey, maybe we could work together on this. I think Walter's just talking about Kenneth Walter. I keep saying your name.
I get that a lot. It's fine.
Yeah, people call me Chris. Crystalite. It's like, hey, Chris, in emails. But what you were just mentioning about, sort of the electrification assumption scenario, and we've got, we're working on, kind of early stage, a couple potential programs around furnace replacements. So, gas heat pumps or dual fuel, and that's something we kind of need to go through and do some baselining of, like, well, what's it look like today, and what are our assumptions around, just folks of the gas furnace replacement market, like what are our assumptions around electrification, so that we can sort of be aligned. So it may be worth, as we're thinking about that and you all are thinking about that, being connected there, so that we kind of have similar assumptions, would be good.
I think that's an excellent input. I appreciate it. And, candidly, I think it's going to be something that's going to have to happen with collaboration with your group, as well as perhaps some of the other utilities that are in our service areas and outside the service areas. So thank you. I'll make sure to get in contact with you after this meeting. We can kind of start getting some things set up here.
Awesome. Thanks, Caleb.
Appreciate it, Peter. Yeah, thanks for jumping in. Any other inputs or thoughts that we should consider in this conversation? Otherwise, we can move on in just a couple of seconds here.
Hey, Caleb, this is Jade from the UTC. No suggestions or anything, but I guess my personal opinion I'll share just on the model scenario. I like the sound of that, just as uncertainty seems to be growing, it seems like it would be valuable to model different scenarios to just kind of play out what the different possibilities are. So I'll just offer my support for that contemplation.
Yeah, thank you, Jade. I appreciate it. One thing that our team is planning to keep in mind is that alternative scenario modeling, be it electrification or be it adjustments to the Washington State Energy Code timeline or content, mostly likely will not be representative in our biennial conservation plan or our program, at least initially, as our year is coming to expire and our BCP is going to be coming up. Just something for us to keep in mind, and maybe there's going to be adjustments to that as the timeline moves on. Kind of an interesting timeline for everyone right now. Excellent. And perhaps we can move on to the next section. I just want to take just a second here to once again thank Ken, Walter, Eli, as well as the other AEG folks that have been involved either on this call or off this call. They've been a great guiding light for us. They've been an expertise and a resource over the last, I believe, 3 CPA iterations for us now, which has been excellent. And the continued support both on their team as well as opportunities and such as program planning, they're much appreciated. Having things integrated like that is really valuable to our team. So thanks for your time today, as well as over the last 6 or 8 months now.
Our pleasure. Thank you.
Great. I think there's 1 or 2 slides here that were extra, and then we can
just a couple of supplementals if anyone wants to know the shapes of power council ramp rates. Those are in the deck there, but nothing we need to dwell on.
Fantastic. We have our annual report update as the next topic. I believe John Storvik is going to lead this conversation. John's one of the head analysts with our team running the annual report, did a great job of completing the document here in the last couple of months and getting it filed. So we're excited to share some of the updates and the processes that are involved in that.
Hey, thank you, Caleb. Not too much to discuss here. We did submit the reports on June 15th to the commission. During the review period, 30 days prior to that submission date, we received 6 comments from the CAG. And we'll go ahead and send those comments out along with how we addressed them either in the report itself or with any kind of supplemental information that we could provide there. And then in regards to the open meeting to discuss those annual reports from the utilities with the commission. That is scheduled for late July. I do not believe we have a date set for that, and Jade might be able to update us there if that is otherwise, but I didn't see one scheduled on the utility commission website. So yeah, that's what it looks like. It went well this year, and appreciate everyone's efforts to provide feedback. It was really nice to be able to rely on everyone's expertise and speak about it with the CAG, and we appreciate that feedback. It always helps us make sure that we can speak to any questions there are before that report gets set in stone. So we just want to say thank you for that.
Hey, John, this is Jade from the UTC. Just wanted to provide sort of an update. We have not decided on an open meeting date for these reports yet. And we may actually be contemplating not having the reports on an open meeting this year, but that is a little up in the air. So I'll circle back with you in the next week or so to give you an update on that.
Okay. Do you think that the late July timeline would still be accurate, or do you think at this point it will likely be in August?
I think if these went on an open meeting, it would more likely be August.
Awesome. Understood. All right. Well, we'll keep our eyes out for that update. Otherwise, does anyone else have any questions regarding the annual report submission or would like a copy of the completed annual report? I can go ahead and send that out once we send the comments as well. All right, not hearing anything else, so I'll go ahead and pass it back to Caleb for EM&V updates.
Excellent. Thanks, John. We'll talk about our EM&V project updates here. I'm actually going to be covering the next, I believe, 2 or 3 sections of our agenda. So I request anyone, if you've got a question or a comment, feel free to jump in at the end of each slide. I'll see if I can provide a couple of seconds just to catch my breath and allow that opportunity here. So I'll see if we can jump into our EM&V project updates. Really, I'd like to separate our EM&V project updates into 2 sections. One being this measure level EM&V update, which has been ongoing now for approximately 9 months and is actually at the concluding phase for the first iteration. And then upcoming, we also have a process EM&V evaluation, which will be relatively new for the program and upcoming. So this slide I'd like to serve as primarily an update and a reminder for the process. Once again, we have partnered with ADM Associates, Inc., who I'll refer to as ADM, to complete the annual independent third-party EM&V for Cascade. That was outlined in section 9C of our conditions document, the last BCP, which we've used as a pillar for this process. In 2022, at the end of it, as well as throughout 2023, we chose to review the commercial program, given the ample amount of opportunity and some of the conversations going on that front. The measures that are involved in that are not only, but just an outline of them are space heating, water heating, envelope measures, food service, and our custom offerings. In my opinion, as well as those in the team and the professional team at ADM, the process was quite robust. We had great support through our team's implementer, which is TRC, who we have Brian on the call with here today, to provide insight on the program, some of the nuances or specifics for about a dozen or so projects, which stuck out as being somewhat irregular in terms of data, to help understand why that may be. For example, different buildings are listed in different manners, such as a warehouse, which has been converted to a CrossFit gym. So some of those nuances where if we didn't have that professional expertise and experience from TRC to support the effort, as well as the data backed up from Sonia Wall's team on our IT front, we wouldn't be able to do this process. So thanks very much for the collaboration on that. As a close to that, the process seemed to have gone quite well. We've been working with ADM closely over the past approximately 8 months now. That's culminated in a final report, which I just received, I believe, the latest draft of on Friday. So at this point, we've gone through the revisions, reviewing, and I think we're at a very close stage to finalizing and submitting that to the commission as a final portion of this project. So it's gone excellent. Quite happy with the reviews overall. I don't have any final results to share in terms of final format, but the preliminary results were looking quite good. No sort of data irregularities or things to really bring up in terms of a alarming piece of data, which is excellent to hear for us. If there's any comments or questions on this, I welcome them. Otherwise, move on to the next slide, please. Excellent. This slide is for the biennial process evaluation, how I'll refer to it for the rest of the day. I would call this the second phase or the second pillar of EM&V, which is separate from the measure level review, which we just completed the commercial program for, but they are related in some sense as well. And actually on the next slide, which we'll get to, we have a nice little, not necessarily a Venn diagram, but a similar chart to show the similarities and differences between those projects. I'd like to bring this up just as an elaboration on the process that we plan on starting here very shortly. We are planning to work with ADM Associates once again to complete this work. We think it's an awesome opportunity to capitalize on the skills that they have in conducting this process evaluation format, as well as the knowledge and the insights which they've gained from working on our program over the past 9 months. So we think it's kind of a unique opportunity to partner with them to complete this other evaluation where we can combine pieces of the reports, provide the data there, and I'm sure there's also going to be some efficiencies in both budgeting, timing, as well as the results that will be gained by partnering with them. However, we are still working on finalizing the scopes, the budgets, and the timelines for that work. As far as a goal for this process, it is something to be completed on a 2-year basis, with this report to be filed in June of 2024. You can see the 2 little lines at the end of this slide show some of our highlights and milestones, where of course we're providing it to those individuals in this call at least 30 days in advance to review the results of that process. If I could request going on to the next slide, we'll be able to show that chart, I believe. Yeah, excellent. I'll give everyone on the call a few seconds to get your bearings and look at what we're looking at. You can see there's 3 columns. On my left is the biennial process evaluation in yellow. That is the thing that needs to be completed every 2 years, which is this past slide. As well as on the right is the perpetual measure level annual impact review. Once again, that involved the commercial program in 2023. And you'll see on the second bullet point section that we're planning on for each year going forward, the next segment being residential equipment, followed by residential envelope in 2025, and our industrial program review in 2026. Once again, that is not finalized, but that is our current plan to complete this cycle and perhaps renew it or review it once again in 2027 once that has been completed. On the left, you'll see some comparisons what the final process evaluation is and what it is not. For the purpose of this call, I'd like to focus on primarily is the both column of how we feel these two items will be overlapping. We think the overlap is a very key part. It doesn't make sense to produce one report which has E&V work and a separate report with E&V work on pretty similar data set and not have them be related or informed by each other. So we want them to be well informed, include such things as equity and diversity and low income wherever possible, which of course is at the front of Cascade's mind and one of our focused efforts, especially with the hiring of Noemi Ortiz in our Oregon and our low income programs. We also see them providing data over multiple years with different analysis techniques that the ADM can utilize and specialize to provide the techniques and the analysis that will be required for it. And then we also anticipate that both these projects will require input and analysis from our CAG team. This is something that Cascade has conducted on a smaller approach, smaller portfolio in the past. However, it's still with a larger scale expertise, I should say, a larger scale E&V than what we typically expertise in. So we'd love to have any insider input as these things come down the line. If anyone on the CAG has any sort of input or expertise to share with us, either on this call or off this call, please feel free to reach out to me anytime. I'm fortunate to be a primary lead on our E&V front still, which is something I've enjoyed over the past approximately year at this point in time. Excellent. Perhaps we can move on to the next section. We can talk about our biennial conservation planning, or the BCP, as I perhaps is referred to already in this meeting without stating the initialism. I just want to bring this up to the CAG. This is perhaps the next major deliverable or project that is on the plate of our team, which we are already focused upon, have had a decent amount of progress on to date. You can see we're in the current phase right now of involving and incorporating the different departments and knowledge bases within the CNGC and MDU group. I was kind of counting on my fingers and toes here earlier and thinking I think we're at 7 departments or so at this point in time, because we do believe that there is that much integration and knowledge sharing within our group that's going to be needed, both as a small report of what we've done in the past, as well as our plan going forward. Once again, outlined in that BCP conditions document, which has been a bit of a beacon for us. We know the BCP will involve a 10-year conservation potential and 2-year targets, which have been informed by the conservation potential assessment. We're fortunate that the load map model, which AEG uses for the CPA, is quite robust. There's a lot of data we can pull from it, and our team has also been trained to utilize load map and pull those data on an as-needed basis, rather than having to always be incorporated through AEG, which is it's a great power source for us. One of the main parts of the BCP is program details and the budgeting. Those are both in process. Primarily the program details I'll talk about here in the next bullet points. That's going to be perhaps the largest portion, in my opinion, that is in the outstanding phase of this BCP in terms of program details, what incentives we want to offer, and how we actually want to provide those incentives. One opportunity we have, which we did take up under the last CPA and the last BCP cycle, is collaborating with AEG's program planning team. So AEG, we've been working with their analysts like Ken, Walter, to actually produce the CPA, but they also have a full separated team who specializes in the program planning and helping companies such as ourselves do program details and building up that BCP document. It sounds like a great value proposition for us. I understand it was quite a success for us in 2022 and 2023 under the last iteration. And it's something that we plan to explore here in the next few weeks to get that process either off the ground or learn why it may or may not be best for our team to utilize for this cycle. One of the things that I anticipate will be a pretty robust conversation is discussions around how the Washington State Energy Code is going to impact the offerings, how we might want to perhaps adjust or change them as timelines produce in 2024 and 2025, and also how they will be impacting us at a portfolio level in terms of cost effectiveness. That's a very high-level summary of the process. Myself, as well as John Storbitt and Carrie Beeren and many others on our team, are going to be working through this process hand in hand, either with AEG or with some other expertise forces over the next few months. I think on the next slide is a conclusion to this. Yeah, excellent. Thank you. So we have upcoming milestones on this chart, and please, anyone on the call, as I'm looking through these milestones, feel free to raise your hand and provide any sort of thoughts or inputs over the conversation in general. You can see a couple of items with the dates at asterisks next to them. Those are what I'm going to be referring to as an internal guideline or internal goal for us. Those without the asterisks, such as consulting the CAG on 7.1, those are things that are mandated once again by that BCP document. First two items we believe to be in a completed phase in terms of beginning to identify the achievable conservation potential for the next 10-year cycle, as well as getting our BCP narrative pieces in order. We've currently got about a dozen or so draft pieces which we'll be beginning to stitch together, improve, and add some more forward-looking thoughts and bases as the months go on here. The next thing I'd like to bring up on this chart is on August 9th, we have a mid-BCP CAG meeting. That is something which I believe is already on the books with the invite sent out, although the material has not yet been finalized for that. So our team will be bringing a small amount of material and some larger thought pieces to the group to ponder and think over. But please, anyone on the call, if you've got something that you'd like us to think about or discuss or to consider, either on that call or off that call, please let us know. We'll be drafting that agenda here in the next few weeks, so there is a little bit of time to make some adjustments, get some thoughts on paper. Some of the deliverable timelines that stick out are first drafts for the 10-year conservation potential and the 2-year target a little bit later in August, the 15th, as well as a month from them having the program details and budget finalized, which is approximately 2 months from now. And then we anticipate having a program tariff and exhibits and really an overall draft of the project submitted to those on the call here right around the middle of October to be filed in the middle of November. At this point in time, everything looks good in terms of timeline. I think we've got quite a bit of expertise in our team, which we can capitalize on to actually build this report and build this process, which I'm pretty happy about. But I would anticipate, and I really do appreciate any sort of insight from those on the call that have it. We'd love to hear. So we want to make this process as robust and confidence-inducing as possible for our team and for our customers who are going to enjoy those incentives. And I believe that wraps up our BCP agenda items. Take just a second here if anyone would like to pop in and share really any comments from that section or anything in the pass of our meeting here. Otherwise, we just have a little bit of a wrap up talking about our upcoming meetings. Excellent. Well, you can see the information here on the screen. I've already brought up on August 9th that mid-BCP planning meeting. Please check your calendars after this to make sure it's on there. If it is not, we'll get an invite sent over to you right away. Otherwise, we have our Q4 meeting on October 18th, which is still on schedule, and I believe the same time as we plan on today. And then I believe there's a wrap-up slide if I remember correctly. If not, please let us know if you did not receive that meeting information. I believe it's under the Teams. Once again, I see Jocelyn on there. I can always forward invite over. I know Des is an excellent resource for us. But more than anything, I want to say thank you all for joining our meeting here today. We were able to wrap up just a touch early, which is always nice during the busy part of the year for a lot of us. So I just want to say thank you for your time and attention. Thanks for the conversations that we've had and the expertise and provided on the phone here. We look forward to continuing the process and building up that BCP for our team here going forward the next few months. Should be excellent. Excellent. Well, thank you all. If there's no other comments, feel free to shoot them to myself. It's caleb.reimer@cngc.com. I'm sure my contact information is out there. Anyone else you'd like to reach out to. Otherwise, I want to say thank you. And please enjoy the rest of your morning and afternoon.